Today's video dedication is for Whiskey Jack. Adeline versus Sliver Queen with no means of a fast Adeline, but we do have Rumour Gatherer for some card advantage as well as some removal, so yeah, we'll try it. We're on the draw. Drawing to Solemn Simulacrum. And our opponent hasn't made a play yet. Skyclave Apparition for us, just another land for us, and holding up the Path to Exile. Harmonic Sliver from our opponent, so they'll be able to destroy artifacts and enchantments. We'll have to be wary of that because we do have equipment in the deck. There's a Nykthos for us, which will come in handy over the next few turns, so get down another Plains into our commander. Muscle Sliver this time, so +1/+1 Anthem on all of the Slivers. Okay, draw into a Rogue's Passage, so plenty of lands to make over the next few turns. I'm just going to get as many Plains in as possible. And I think dealing with this thing now rather than later gets this thing out of the way, and it also allows us to swing in with the Adeline this turn. So it's Skyclave Apparition pointed at the Harmonic Sliver and holding up Path to Exile. I'll hold off on the Path to Exile for as long as possible because I don't want to fix my opponent's colours in a 5-colour deck. So we do only get the one human token. For some reason our opponent takes it. They could have blocked there. Our opponent missing black mana at the moment, so the Path to Exile would certainly help there. Although Gale Rider Sliver is well worth getting rid of. Alright, and there was a Destroy Evil. So getting rid of our Adeline Resplendent Cathar can go back in the command zone. I imagine we're just replaying that next turn. And swinging in at us for 2, we'll just take the damage. Only got one card in hand over there, so it may well be that they're in top deck mode. A Tocassia's Welcome. Alright, let's get down the Nykthos and just hard cast the Adeline again. Alright, and could swing in with one of our creatures here to get another human token, but not much point against the 2/2. Could try our luck in swinging in with a human token and hoping they don't block like last time, but I imagine that was a misclick. Alright, tapping out, and still one card in hand. Holding up 6 mana. There is a Dousing Dagger for us. So let's see here. Get down the Rogue's Passage. Let's throw out the Rumour Gatherer. And then we'll get a Scry when we swing in. And after that we'll have 6 mana available off the Nykthos. So maybe Dousing Dagger and Tocassia's Welcome. So the Adeline is going to trigger and then triggers the Rumour Gatherer when the token enters. And that is a Plains on top. I don't mind drawing into a Plains, so we'll put that on top. Alright, so then it is 6 mana, and yeah, we'll get out Tocassia's Welcome, ready for the Solemn next turn maybe. And then get down the Dousing Dagger as well. Obviously not holding up the Path to Exile because not too eager to give my opponent that black mana. The Dousing Dagger, giving our opponent a couple of plant tokens. Pass at that. The Slivers swinging in, obviously the plants have Defender, so can't swing into us with those. I'm thinking that we set up the Dousing Dagger with the Rogue's Passage next turn and get some commander damage through to our opponent as well. Deciding to hold on to a card in hand, we draw into the Plains that we put on top previously. So let's tap down the Nykthos for mana. Gives us 7 mana, so target the Adeline with that. Then we can equip the Dousing Dagger. And then we have 3 mana left up, so with the floating mana totals 4, and we can go for the Solemn Simulacrum. Still 2 cards left in our opponent's hand. Triggers the Rumour Gatherer for a Scry. We'll shuffle with the Solemn Simulacrum after the ramp before the Scry on the Rumour Gatherer. And on top we see a Grand Abolisher. Don't think I'm too worried about that. Our opponent doesn't seem to be doing much of anything to us. And if he is able to, he's probably going to do it here. Can still get rid of the Adeline. Swinging with my 2 power creatures to try and get rid of the plant tokens. Because I don't want to be putting mana into the Rogue's Passage every turn, although it'll probably win us the game next turn, if we are able to. The token entering off our commander triggers the Tocassia's Welcome and the Rumour Gatherer. So drawing into a Plains and a Sol Ring as well, so plenty of mana this game. So we do hit our opponent, and that gets us into the Lost Veil, which will tap for 3 mana, which means we can go for Call the Coppercoats on our opponent's turn. Got them down to 13 and 17 points of commander damage, which means we do win next turn if our opponent's not careful. Continuing to swing in with the Flyers. Alright, so still with 2 cards in hand, I imagine our opponent's just playing this out, or play into any kind of board wipe that he might have at instant speed. Does have 7 mana held up. We'll go for Takacia's Welcome on the stack first so that we can get all these scries out of the way. We'll get 1 scry first, then a card draw, so a land goes on the bottom, and then it'll be 2 scries. Alright, drawing into Sword of Feast and Famine. A Cavern of Souls is on the bottom, so managing to get rid of 2 lands so far. Land tax can certainly go on the bottom. And then we draw into the Snow-Covered Plains, so getting rid of some stuff off the top at least. Alright, now instead of the Rogue's Passage, we might as well get down not the Swords to Plowshares, the Sword of Feast and Famine, because that'll give protection from green, which is obviously relevant against our opponent. So cast Sword of Feast and Famine, and our opponent decides to scoop. Yeah, all we do there is equip the Sword of Feast and Famine and we swing straight through to our opponent. Obviously could have done it with the Rogue's Passage as well, but if they had some kind of removal, I'd rather have more permanents in play, which obviously is going to be more of a headache for our opponent. Obviously that's more ramp for us as well, as forcing them to discard cards. Our opponent didn't do too well on the Sliver front there, so we'll try another game. Up against Krenko this time. And we have a land tax, we're on the play, so do we want to go slow against a Krenko deck? I mean, we've got Vanquish the Horde, so yeah, I suppose we could try it. A Sol Ring, so looks like we're going to see a turn 2 Krenko, a Paradise Mantle as well, down to 5 cards in hand. So land tax isn't going to trigger straight away, we might hit lucky and get into another land here. It is instead a Grand Abolisher, so we'll get down the Shadow Spear, ready to get some lands out of our deck next turn. A Foreboding Statue, and the Paradise Mantle going on to the Foreboding Statue, so that can tap for a mana of any colour. Our opponent got down a second land, so the land tax triggering as we planned. And now drawing into a Sword of Hearth and Home as well, so drop a land, drop the Grand Abolisher as well. And we're ending the turn with a full grip still. And now Krenko Mob Boss into play. We can give them a few turns with Krenko, I think, before we go for the Vanquish the Horde. In fact, we'll have to, because we need the cost reduction on that in order to actually be able to cast it. They went for Outnumber, so blowing up the Grand Abolisher. I mean, good to get it out of their hand. We were going to wipe the board anyway. So let's go for just 1 Plains with the land tax, because we're not going to be able to cast too many spells this turn. Don't want to have to discard hand size. A Castle Ardenvale we draw into, so might as well continue setting up with the equipment. We'll play the Sword of Hearth and Home and pass. Hobgoblin Bandit Lord, and then activating the Krenko, so the Krenko is creating 2 Goblin tokens, which is 5 creatures in play. So could go for Vanquish the Horde. Alright, there's a Skyclave Apparition. So I think that's one thing that we could go for here, maybe? Or would I rather just go for the Solemn Simulacrum into the board wipe? I think that's better. We can go for Skyclave Apparition after the board wipe, once they replay their Krenko for a second time. Alright, a Vandal Blast from our opponent, so getting out the equipment hurts us. A Solemn Simulacrum going to draw us, but getting rid of the 2 equipment, like I said. They're down to 3 cards in hand though. We will draw with the Solemn Simulacrum into a Sigarda's Aid, ironically. And creating some more Goblin tokens, so can definitely play the Vanquish the Horde. And then hitting us for some damage with the Hobgoblin, and swinging in for 4 points of damage with the tokens. It's turn 5 and they've only made 3 lands though, so if we could get rid of that Sol Ring, we'd put them in a really bad position. There's yet more removal for the Krenko. So let's go for the Plains, for the 2 mana Vanquish the Horde. And then it is Adeline Resplendent Cathar, and might as well get down the Sigarda's Aid as well. Yeah, I don't care. When we go for the Path to Exile, we can do it on our turn. An Anger from our opponent, not really all that worried about an Anger. Might be useful to exile that. We see an Enlightened Tutor, which could be handy with the Sigarda's Aid, so yeah. Go for the Castle Ardenvale into play, and then it can be the Skyclave Apparition. That can get rid of the Anger, and then we can actually swing in with the Adeline and not worry about destroying the Anger. Obviously we don't want our opponent to have haste for the rest of the game. And not particularly worried about Mirror Entity until we've got a bunch of creatures in place, so Guardian of Faith being held up along with the Enlightened Tutor and the Path to Exile is fine, I think. Okay, and there is a Chaos Warp. So this will give our opponent a 4-4. Yeah, I'm guessing they don't have a board wipe if they went for Chaos Warp, so let's go for Guardian of Faith and have our creatures phase out here. So our opponent holds up 3 mana and 2 cards and goes through to the end of the turn. We will cast Enlightened Tutor, grab ourselves an artifact. I think maybe Sword of Fire and Ice is good so that we can give Pro Red, and that will double up as drawing us cards as well as throwing some extra damage around. So draw into that this turn. We will play and equip it onto our commander. Sigarda's Aid, going to throw that on there for free. Could have done it at instant speed, but our opponent knows we have it, so don't think it really matters. And then swing in, start piling in the commander damage. Our commander bumps up to a 7-7. We will shock our opponent. They are at 10 commander damage at this point, so they are at risk of losing soon if they're not careful. Get out the Soul Ring now that we've seen the back of the Vandal Blast. Okay, and just decided to scoop it up at that. So the plan next turn would have been we draw into... Alright, Call the Copper Coats was pretty useless, but plan would be to dump down Mirror Entity and get another creature. We would have been pretty close to commander damage. I'm not sure that we could have got them on commander damage next turn. Anyway, our opponent obviously didn't fancy his odds with the protection from red. We'll play another game. Adeline versus the ever-popular Nicol Bolas the Ravager. We have 2 lands. We can go for Enlightened Tutor into some fast mana maybe. Yeah, plenty of mana. Not a whole lot else going on, but we'll try it. And of course our opponent has fast mana as well, so that'll be a turn 2 Nicol Bolas most likely. We are on the draw, and draw into a Wrath of God. And our opponent goes down to 3 cards in hand after playing another Signet, and gets down Nicol Bolas the Ravager. So we'll get rid of the Anointed Procession to that. And then during the upkeep we'll go Enlightened Tutor, and we'll try and keep up with our opponent on the mana front. Could just go for a land tax here, there's an argument for, but it's pretty slow, so I think it has to be the Soul Ring here. Problem is we are missing double white at this point, but I think we just have to try and keep up on the mana front like I said, so it is Soul Ring, and it's a good use of our mana to go for the Sword of Hearth and Home here. Just no creature to equip our equipment's onto at the moment, annoyingly. Our opponent lands 4 points of commander damage on and then transforms Nicol Bolas the Arisen. So that's pretty much us done, I imagine, thanks to the fast mana. Getting to another means of getting some stuff going, if we can actually get a creature into play, but yeah, been way too slow here. A Nicol Bolas the Arisen by turn 3 is going to be pretty difficult to deal with. Clearing 3 lands off the top along with a Mirror Entity and a Sigarda's Aid. Mirror Entity will be relevant once we can actually play the Hideaway card. Our opponent's going for the Limit Break apparently. Went for drawing 2 cards and now has 8 in hand. So playing another Planeswalker, that is Ugin the Ineffable. And they're obviously reliant on rocks being in a Grixis deck, so getting that down for free. Then plussing on the Ugin makes a Spirit token and manifests a card off the top. And finally getting to our land, it's far too late for that, but we'll get down Adeline regardless. We are a mana shy, otherwise we'd be able to get down the Hammer of Nazan. Might as well just equip up the Sword of Hearth and Home, I suppose. But we have, of course, already lost this one. So our opponent's within limit break range now. And then exiling off the top with Ugin, not even bothering to try and destroy our commander. Our opponent's got in a free Grim Monolith and taps that down for 3 mana, so it is allowed into a Wormcoil Engine. And seeing another Walker, Ashiok Nightmare Muse, making a creature with that as well. And yep, getting into the lands a little bit too late here. Hasn't been a terrible game for us, it's just been an incredible game for the Nicol Bolas player. Might as well just get down Hammer of Nazan here, just for the fun of it. If we'd been able to have the Hammer of Nazan on our commander this turn, by not missing a land drop previously, we could have gone for the Wrath of God and wiped out our opponent's board, but they would have had a couple of worms in play regardless anyway, so yeah, there's just no way for us to wriggle out of this. Get a free equip with the Sword of the Animist and Hammer of Nazan. Then we might as well swing in at the Nicol Bolas, but we're not going to get through here. Our opponent blocking with a couple of Spirit tokens here to take advantage of the cards that they'll get from that. and obviously going to gain some life from the Worm Coil engine as well. And there we go, Nicol Bolas exiling all but one card from our library, so we've only got a couple of turns left at this point. Make that one turn left. We lose next turn thanks to the Nightmare token exiling the top card of our library. So one card in hand and the rest of our cards exiled. So with one card in hand and the rest of our cards exiled, we lose this one. Good game to our opponent, we'll try another one. Up against Grist this time, and we've got a board wipe if our opponent deals with our card draw effects. We are on the draw as well, so should be able to get something done this game. Just a land from our opponent, we draw into Castle Ardenvale, so it will be an Esper Sentinel for us. And there we see a Knight's Whisper, so they draw 2, lose 2, and we'll draw 1 to the Esper Sentinel. Pearl Medallion is a great 2-drop for turn 2. Dousing Dagger isn't terrible either. Bajuka Bog coming into play tapped, and then they pay 1 into Esper Sentinel for the Mana Crypt. And going down to 5 cards in hand, it's a Smuggler's Copter. Okay, and there's Austere Command for us, which can't touch Planeswalkers, is noteworthy. Get down a Plains, and I think we're best just going for the Adeline Resplendent Cathar as soon as we can, then we can swing in with the Esper Sentinel and that will trigger our commander. And there we see the Toxic Deluge for 4, so wiping out our entire board, and they do pay for the Esper Sentinel. So commander back into the command zone. A Liquimetal Torque for us, so let's get down the castle. And I think maybe going for Liquimetal Torque and the Welcoming Vampire is a good idea here, seeing as how this thing will likely trigger the Adeline next turn, and we can probably use the flying to get through to the Grist. So there we go, our opponent does play the Grist and gets out an insect token as well. It's crew 1 on this thing, so we need to be wary that they can crew that as well, although they have more removal anyway. A Putrefy goes on to the Welcoming Vampire, and now deciding to go Smuggling Copter. Okay, so it's Emiria the Sky Ruin now. Let's get down the Adeline again. And then I don't want to give my opponent the sack fodder. They're likely just going to get rid of the Adeline here, so play out a tap land and forego the Dousing Dagger. And then using the insect token to crew the Smuggler's Copter and then ticking down with the Grist. So once again, our commander is dealt with. Then we see Finale of Devastation grabbing a Tireless Tracker from the bin and playing a Reflecting Pool into that. So they do make a clue token, 3 cards in hand. And there's a Mana Crypt for us, so that makes it more feasible that we go for the Austere Command maybe. So Austere Command on artifacts and small creatures. Cracking a clue token in response puts a plus counter on the Tireless Tracker, that doesn't matter. So obviously wipes out our artifacts as well. Don't think getting down the Mana Crypt really matters, and again I don't want to give my opponent the plant tokens until we can flip this around in the same turn. So not going to bother with the Dousing Dagger for now. Problem is we're now giving our opponent a chance to make a plant token and then immediately get rid of our commander. I'm seeing a Thoughtseize from our opponent. So there you go, should have got down the Mana Crypt. They could just as easily have had spot removal on the Mana Crypt, so wow. Got Sol Ring as well, our opponents getting absolute god tier draws. They did mill an Imperial Seal there, but of course had a Necropotence as well, absolute god tier draws from our opponent here. I'm not too ashamed to lose this one in all honesty. So we're just forcing our opponent to take the commander down again basically. Difficult for a creature combat based deck to fight against constant removal and board wipes and stuff. They are down to 15 life though, so there's only so far they can go with the Necropotence. They're going to have to come up with a means of winning in the next 15 life or so. About 2 more hand refills with that. But it's looking like it's a pretty spiky deck, typical 1v1 list with lots of removal and card draw and tutors and stuff, so I'm sure my opponent will be able to do something. And then we see a Hymn to Turak discarding the Vanquish the Horde and the Dousing Dagger, and then sacrificing the insect again to get rid of our Adeline yet again. We're 3 planes away from switching on Emiria the Sky Ruin, so obviously going to put my commander back in the command zone. Obviously wishing I'd played the Mana Crypt at this point. And what did I say? A Grim Tutor, playing out a Pendelhaven, and then going for the exile with Necropotence again. So they're up to 7 cards again and down to 10 life. And we draw into Teferi's Protection, which I doubt is going to do anything for us, but might save us from a combo next turn maybe. one land away from getting our commander down again, and they're just going to sacrifice the insect token and get rid of our commander, so not likely that we're going to keep it in play at this point. We can activate the Castle Ardenvale though, although that's just a 1-1. So milling a card and getting an insect into play. A go blank is what they milled there. Now seeing Lily, the last hope. Milling 2 and then returning 1 to hand, so that is a choice between Nissa and Oracle of Moldaya. And they choose the Nissa. Don't think they made a land yet, so I should be able to flip it round. Instead going for Vraska Relic Seeker. So I suppose they could just sit back on their Planeswalkers and not draw any more cards for the rest of the game. But that obviously buys us a lot of time. Deciding to go down to 8 with the Necropotents. Okay, and I did hold priority at the end of the turn there, but apparently didn't let me do it. So, alright, there is a Mind Stone. I mean, yeah, we'll just get down the Mind Stone at this point. There is a Yavimaya in place, so we can tap down the Ancient Tomb for just 1 mana. I'll hold on to the Mind Stone and draw at the end of my opponent's turn so that we can maximise the amount of mana, because it might be that our opponent can just have us discard whatever we draw into. Now down comes the Nissa, Vastwood Seer, seen that plenty of times on the channel. And then playing a land into it, we'll flip it round into Nissa Sage Animist. And revealing the top card with that, they reveal another Walker in Nissa Voice of Zendikar. Making a Pirate with the Vraska, an Insect with Grist. And out comes the next token generator. Seems as though it's a Grixis control build with Super Friends as a sub-theme to make some tokens. Plus counter on each of the tokens with the Nissa. The Vraska is up to the limit break here. Target player's life total becomes 1. So they're at 6 cards in hand and looking like they can eventually beat us here. Noteworthy that if we had tapped down the Ancient Tomb for 2 life previously, then we could have both activated Castle Ardenvale and the Mind Stone here. But yeah, as I'm sure you're all aware, I've kind of given up on this game at this point. So crack the Mind Stone during the end step. Draws us into Rumour Gatherer and into another land. So play out the Rumour Gatherer. Then our life total becoming 1 to the Vraska. We're going to go for Teferi's Protection in response to that because we don't want our life total to change here, of course. Highly doubt there's anything we can do this game, but best to go for that anyway. So just ticking up all the Planeswalkers, making more tokens there. Then revealing Llanowar Elves off the Nissa, so playing that straight away. And now seeing a Lucille, and equipping the Lucille onto a plant token, making it a 2-1 with Menace. And they go down to 5 with the Necropotents. Okay, that's a Lauren of the Third Path. I think we would destroy a Lucille with that. So let's play out the Lauren. That will give us a Scry, and we'll blow up the equipment. Scrying a Rick, Steadfast Leader onto the top. A little bit too late for all this, but we'll leave it on top just for the fun of it. And then we'll activate the Castle Ardenvale. And that will trigger the Rumour Gatherer, giving us a card draw for the second time it triggers. And obviously get into the Rick. -2, -1 from the Liliana goes on to the Lauren, so we can't draw any more cards with that. Wouldn't want to draw my opponent any more cards anyway. I want to force him to use the Necropotents and eventually run out of cards, which isn't going to happen with cards like Nissa in play. Tutor number 3 that we've seen this game, a Vamp Tutor. And tutor number 4 with Liliana Vess. Unless they tick that up, they could have us discard the Rick. Yep, having us discard instead. Then Dawnglade Regent, they become the Monarch and go down to 3 with the Necropotents. Gonna have to be careful casting the Vamp Tutor. Maybe they'll go down to 2 and then forget that you lose life to the Vamp Tutor. Wouldn't have thought so. Our opponent's looking pretty capable here. We'll take 6 to the Menace Pirates. Not sure why they weren't swinging in with the Insects. They draw from the Monarchy as well, so discarding the Prismatic Vista. It has now been exiled by the Necropotents. Alright, there's a Skull Clamp for us, not bad. So just out of curiosity, we'll see what we can get into off a Skull Clamp. Get rid of the human token, draw 2 cards, into a Cavern of Souls and a Solemn Simulacrum. I think we're after a board wipe at this point, so go for the Skull Clamp onto the Rumour Gatherer as well. That is a Champion of the Parish. That would be a board wipe if our opponent had bigger creatures, but unfortunately not, so could just get out chump blockers. These are quite big menace creatures, unfortunately, so I'll probably just take out the Elspeth straight away. Let's go for a champion and skull clamp it. Okay, takes us into Grand Abolisher and Pure Steel Paladin. Yeah, need to actually get into some kind of equipment in order to make use of that. Let's go Cavern of Souls, naming Soldier. Or actually it's human in this deck, isn't it? And we'll get down the Solemn Simulacrum. Get ourselves ever closer to the Emeria. Unfortunately, this isn't a Plains, so we would have had the Emeria online. I don't think it'll make any difference, but it would have been nice to get the Emeria going. Throw the Skull Clamp onto the Solemn Simulacrum, going for the Tutor with Liliana Vess, and then revealing it with the Nissa. And we see a Yawgmoth's Will, so deciding to cast a bunch of stuff from the bin here. And it's noteworthy that the Finale of Devastation is in the bin, so can just go for some kind of overrun effect here, I imagine. And that's what he does. X is 9 on the Finale of Devastation, deciding to just slam down an Ebon Death Draco Lich. So our opponent obviously goes in for the attack. We block the biggest amount of damage we can, and we take 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 and 11. So we'll draw 3 cards here. And that gets us into a little bit of removal, but it's not the Wrath that we need. Our opponent draws a card at the end step, going down to 50 in the library. We'll have to discard down to hand size. Just discarding a land to that, so Necropotence exiles it. Okay, Prismatic Vista makes us another Plains, which is far too slow. So I think it's just a case of getting down as many 1/1s as possible with the Elspeth and going for Skull Clamps. Then clamp a Soldier token after ticking up. Draw 6 cards for 3 mana here. A Guardian of Faith. Call the Coppercoats is pretty good. Although our opponent's got us in the air with the Hexproof Draco Lich. And we can't get down the Divine Visitation, unfortunately. If we'd drawn into the Call the Coppercoats sooner, then that would have been alright. We can maybe get into a means of haste and steal the Monarchy away from our opponents so that we can get rid of Dawnglade Regent and then the Draco Lich, but then our opponent's going wide on us anyway. Yeah, nothing we can do here, I don't think. So just drawing into a Mentor of the Meek and a Land Tax. We've already seen Vanquish the Horde this game, so there's no chance of us drawing into a small board wipe or anything. We'll just clamp again for the fun of it. And there we see our Plains, just dump that into play. And I think the only thing we can do now really is hope that our opponent gets cocky and doesn't swing in with the Flyer. That will give us a bunch of Call the Coppercoats that we can chump block with, although they've got Menace anyway, so yeah. We do get extra tokens that can double block thanks to the plants, and they don't deal damage to us either, so yeah, anyway. Obviously it would have been good to take down the Elspeth and get rid of the Ebon Death and the other big creature that way, but then we wouldn't have drawn into Call the Coppercoats, so yeah. Held out for longer than I thought we would. With all the tutors and control that we've seen from our opponent, they should have had us a lot sooner than this, I think. But on turn 14 they managed to get us, and they have swung in with the Flyer, so there's no point showing them Call the Coppercoats and dragging the game out further. We'll just take the hit. Yeah, another turn or two. We might have been able to get out from underneath our opponent there. If we had got down the Divine Visitation and Call the Coppercoats, that would have given us enough Flyers to go wide on our opponent and be able to block our opponent's stuff as well. Especially with them getting so low with the Necropotence. We've got protection from their colours with the sword as well, so yeah, it was actually a closer game than it might have looked initially. But obviously they commanded that game quite thoroughly, so it's good gain to my opponent. I'm sure he'll deal the damage eventually. Hopefully you all enjoyed this series of games from Adeline, and I will hopefully see you all in the next one. Big thank you to the patrons for supporting. I'm Tribalkai. Thank you for watching.